So there's no moving parts there. Cooperative Legacy Project interview number 12, June 30th, 2005. We're visiting with LeRoy Hardy, former South Dakota Farmers Union state board member, lobbyist, and field representative. LeRoy, where and when were you born?
I was born in Sturgis, March 5th, 1921.
Okay. And where was your family originally from before they ended up out here in the hills area?
Well, how far down do you want to go?
One of the members of the advisory committee thinks it's a good idea to get family origins of overseas and so on, where people came from or when.
On my grandma Hardy's side, she and some other people come over from the Isle of Man, which is in England. They were hard rock miners.
Okay.
And they needed hard rock miners in the homestake at Lead, so they settled Lead. Then my granddad...
When was that, by the way?
I can't tell you for sure. She was a young person.
Yeah.
She was a young person, but I don't know the exact year. Anyway, and then my granddad, Grandpa Hardy, he was born and raised in Missouri, and I don't know where he come from before that. But anyhow, when he was a young guy, about 21, I guess, he helped some people drive cattle, trailed about here from Missouri to South Dakota. And he was going to go back, and he got it back as far as Fort Pierre, and they needed teamsters to drive bull teams. The only way they had to get freight to the hill was with bull teams and wagons. So he became a bullwhacker for a few years, and then he decided he'd work at a homestead. He didn't work in the mine; he worked in the mill, and that's where he met my grandma, Elizabeth. Her maiden name was Shimon. Anyway, then they used to come out in here and he'd see how some of the places already been farming. He'd seen the alfalfa grow real good and that kind of stuff, so he homesteaded out east of town here. And then he built up quite a bit of ranch. He had land for his sons. They started farming, and I was out there. I farmed till 1968, I think it was. Then I moved to town and done various jobs till I finally got to be I sold Farmers Union insurance, and as you mentioned, I was on the state board of directors. Before that, I'd been a county chairman, and so that's pretty much what it was. I ended up being a lobbyist and a fieldman and so forth.
Well, let's not jump ahead too far because we're going to cover all of that.
Oh, are we?
Yes, we are. Okay. Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have one brother, and I had two sisters. One of them is deceased.
Okay. What were their names?
Dolores and Edna. And Glenn is a brother. He lives in Whitewood, or just out of Whitewood.
Okay. And you had a cousin that played baseball, didn't you?
Yes, that was Carol Hardy. He was top-notch high school athlete. Then he went to Boulder, played football for Boulder, Colorado. And then he, for a year or two, he played professional baseball. No, wait a minute. He played professional football first, and then he played a few years. He didn't really get started that good because 1 year he's drafted. That's when we had the universal draft. And then the next year he had appendicitis, so he missed a couple of years when he had his best chance. But he did play long enough to be on the Major League retirement program. Now he lives down in Boulder, I think.
Okay. What are some of your earliest memories from would you say from the ranch out here when you were a kid? How was it out there then? Well,
there's a lot different now. I guess, I don't know. I remember little bits of things when I was real small, but I guess I remember doing chores. Everybody had chores to do morning and night, and they had the neighbor. There's a lot of neighbors. There was a lot of neighborhood activities, And of course, the old country school, there was a big. It was. I think we had up to 20-some in one room schoolhouse at a time or two.
Mm-hmm.
Incidentally, 2 of my grade school teachers still living.
Really?
And I'm getting pretty old, so that tells you something about them, huh?
What was your dad's name?
Roy.
Uh-huh. What sort of person was he? You want to talk about him a little bit?
What
you want to talk about him a little bit? What sort of person he was?
Well, let's see. He had 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and of course they worked on the home ranch for a while. Then he was drafted World War I, and he was wounded, more or less a minor wound, but it took a long time to heal up. Then he come back, and he and my mother were married, and they built a house, and we lived out there the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Almost, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Ranched.
Around,
Yep.
Combination ranch and farming. Done quite a bit of farming.
Okay. You want to talk about your mother a little bit?
Okay. Her family come out here from Missouri too, in what they called a Hanyaker car.
Oh, really? What part of Missouri?
I think it was around Macon.
Okay.
You know what a Hanyaker car is?
No, I don't.
Well, there's a box car, and in one end of it they had where they lived. They lived in that till they got out here. And the other end they had probably a team of horses and some basic farm machinery, probably just a walking plow and that kind of stuff, and homesteaded. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure. Well, let's see. There was her dad and 3 of his brothers homesteaded out in the Vale area mostly. And she had a brother that was a twin brother, and then she had another brother, older brother, and 3 sisters. Her dad died when she was a relatively young person. He was pretty, so I never knew him. Mm-hmm. And I never knew my grandma Castile either.
Oh, okay. And her name, your mom's maiden name was
Castile.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't know where they come from either before that. I guess one of my cousin's boys done a lot of research on family, and I guess it went back to Pennsylvania, but.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you were young, what did you want to do? Did you want to ranch or farm?
Yes, basically all my life, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's really what you wanted to do. Yeah. And how was life on the farm and ranch back in when you start to remember things in the early 30s, I suppose? How was that more different than today?
Well, it was actually in the 20s.
20s, okay.
And my dad farmed with horses, and it took 6 horses to pull a 2-bottom plow, and they planted a lot of corn. That was kind of a basic thing then.
Oh, okay.
And of course other grain, mostly wheat and oats. And of course they had to put up hay, and you used horsepower on that and arm power to stack the hay. No baling, hardly any baling. Everything was physical. Everything you done was physical, so it was stayed in pretty good physical condition. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Everything, and of course, everybody had some poultry, especially chickens, and a few milk cows, and then if they had pasture enough, they run stock cattle. Cattle too, a few. Did
your dad have stock cattle?
Yes, some. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had some pasture. We had some land that was too rolling to farm properly, but it grew good grass, and so that's what they done on it.
Mm-hmm. What was the Black Hills area like during the 30s? It's a lot of tourists at an Air Force base now, and the Homestake Mine is gone now, but was there then?
Yeah. Well, of course, the Homestake Mine was one of the big employers in this, especially in the northern hills. Mm-hmm. And Oh, when I was growing up, we spent quite a bit of time just driving around hills, going for family picnics and that type of thing. And of course, the roads was all gravel, and even to Mount Rushmore, and that was in the early '30s when they carved Mount Rushmore. Used to go up there, and I remember going up that hill, and it was just so washboard rough that you couldn't hardly go. And so that type of thing. And another thing, of course, I was older then. They had that stratosphere balloon flights out of that place up by down Rapid City. It's kind of interesting. And we didn't travel a lot like the hills, but quite a bit, And some people used to go up and put wood. That was another thing when I was a kid. You always burned wood, heat for heating and cooking too. But my grandpa and grandma and his brother-in-law homesteaded on some land out here on Alkali Creek. At that time they called them wood claim, tree claims. But there was trees naturally growing there, and a lot of the wood we got was over there, cut with mostly ash and oak, native ash and oak.
You mentioned Mount Rushmore. Did you get up there at all to watch them when they were carving?
Oh yes. You'd go up there and they had certain. The blasting was scheduled, so you get up there. You knew what time it was. You get up there and watch the rock fly off and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. What did people think about out here? One of the key farmers union issues in the 1930s was the ore tax. How was that viewed around here, closer into the hills? You remember?
Well, of course, Homestake opposed it as everything they could think of. Some of it legal, some of it not. Yeah. But anyway, I don't remember talking about it that much.
Okay.
Do you want to go into something? I remember Emil Oryx was in the legislature when they passed that. You probably got that.
Yeah, we'll come up to that, okay. I think. Where did you go to school at? You mentioned a country school out here, I think, didn't you?
I went to high school here in Sturgis.
You went to high school right in Sturgis. Yeah. Okay. What was high school in Sturgis like in those days?
That is a story.
Okay.
They had and I don't know when that schoolhouse was built, but it was made out of native stone. And when I started high school, all 8 grades and all 4 grades of high school was in the same building. It's a small building, actually. A gym didn't even have any room for bleachers. You had to set up, there was a little bit around side. And I remember it was crowded. There was classrooms down next to the boiler room, and took a biology class in a cloakroom. But that changed. We graduated from a brand new high school. So that's...
Okay. And what year was that?
1939.
Okay. Did you go to college at all?
Oh, I went about a semester, and that was when World War II was starting, and I didn't really apply myself. So I come back out and help my dad on the farm, and was waiting to be drafted.
And did you get drafted?
I didn't get drafted. I wanted to go because everybody my age was going, and so I contacted the draft board here at Meade County, and we'll take you. But before they could do it, I froze on the farm and had to work on the farm the rest of the war. It wasn't always appreciated by some people.
What do you mean by you froze on the farm?
Well, see, manpower, they drafted so many people, and of course the casualties was heavy.
Yeah.
So they're getting, for instance, we used to thrash grain with a thrashing machine, and they needed a crew. And the only help you could get was older men that should have been retired. And it was that way all over, so they needed younger people to do, not only in the farm, but factories and everything, I guess. And that's what it was. It was a government action they took, and they called it freezing them in your job.
Oh, okay. What was life like out there during those years? Certainly.
You mean during the war years?
Yeah.
Well, it was pretty tough. I shouldn't say that. It didn't. Think back, it was a lot different. You couldn't buy new tires.
Yeah, rationing.
Gas was rationed. The food was rationed, although that didn't bother rural people so much because you made your own butter and you had your own meat and all that stuff. And of course you could get fuel for tractors. We had tractors by then. And you get stamps and you get your fuel, all right. Didn't have much for running around. I had an old car, but I couldn't hardly make it run.
And of course, this all came right after the Depression. Were the 30s right out here next to the hills? Was it as dry as it was?
Oh, it was very dry.
Further east?
It was just terrible dry. So one or 2 years, the pastures didn't even get green except in the bottom of the draws where some little bit of snow laid. Remember one year my dad planted corn, and it didn't come up until August when we had a shower go through. So that's how dry it was. Had to just scrape by. You had to buy hay and milk cows and just to get by. You pull Russian thistle for cattle feed. Of course, everybody had a straw pile. That made a big difference.
Well, there were a lot of small farmers out here then?
Oh, yes.
Settled?
Oh, a lot more. Yeah, there was a lot of farmers. Well, even before my time, there's, every quarter was homesteaded, but that wasn't big enough for this area. You couldn't make it on a quarter. And so they gradually got bigger and bigger operations.
Was there a farmers union out here then?
Yes, I remember when I was a little kid. I was a junior in the junior program, and they had big meetings. And then they'd have county meetings, I think, once a month, and that was a big crowd. And the district meetings was well attended. Yeah, Farmers Union was pretty strong out here. A lot of members. And I don't ask me for the numbers. I don't remember that.
What did that involve starting cooperatives around here?
Well, not as early as in the eastern part of the state of North Dakota. They started some cooperatives, like a grocery store. They had a cooperative cream station here, but they never had any oil company. There was no oil company or elevator. We didn't have a co-op oil company till, I suppose, the 40s or early 50s. Finally got one started.
There were some cooperative stores in some of the small towns.
Yeah, Union Center was a cooperative store, and of course it ended up the manager running it. But I remember my dad, 1935, he had some shares in it. And he bought a new car, and he thought, well, I'm going to see if I can get the shares are good. So we went to Union Center. That was quite a trip anyway. But he did get some money out of those shares. And they just kind of sat here till, I don't know. Well, of course, the County Farmers Union talked about cooperatives, the REA and those things come in. And they'd, Meade County Farmers Union once a year would have what they call a co-op rally and have speakers come in from Senex. And then it was called Farmers Union Central Exchange. And different people, and the REA managers would come in and talk. And eventually, out there at Union Center, especially in that area, they set up a cooperative. They started very bigger, but it's a big deal now.
When did you meet Virginia?
I think I told you I'm very good on dates. I don't remember.
About when?
Well, about, I suppose that was in the middle 40s. And, that time, different communities would have public dances Saturday night. And so Newell and Vale would alternate, and that was a big card. And so I met at one of those New Vale dances. And I talked to another guy. Said, "Where'd you meet his wife?" "Oh, he's at that damn Vale dance." But that was, that was how you got around then.
Mm-hmm.
You get a dance ticket all night for 50 cents, I think, maybe $1 for supper. And that was part of your date. You had to buy supper.
Oh. Okay. And you've got kids.
Yes, 4 kids, 4 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
You call them 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay, where are they all at now?
Well, Sarah, the oldest one, lives on a farm just north of Wall, South Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
Phyllis, second one, she's living in Plano, Texas. Marcia is living in Palm Springs, California. She's a psychotherapist out there, and she's never married.
Mm-hmm.
And Linda, the last one, runs a grocery store in Buffalo, South Dakota.
Oh,
and
Buffalo, okay.
And she's a widow now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When did you and Virginia get married? I guess we're kind of bouncing around a little bit here.
Oh, let's see. I got to do some figure. See, last year was. Let's see. Last year night at the 2004, and it was her 59th anniversary. So that is 5, 4. Must be 1945.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned you one of the daughters is married to a rancher.
Yes, a farmer.
Farmer at Wall.
He doesn't have a fence or livestock on his place.
No livestock.
He got the prettiest wheat you ever saw. Look at that head.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. And when did you first become involved in Farmers Union? You mentioned the cooperatives out here. You mentioned you were in the youth program, but you said something about being a county officer. When was that?
Don't know. I don't remember. Yeah, I remember going to a youth camp. I think that was at Bob Marshall camp, and Erickson. What is his first name?
Paul
Erickson was one of the main staff people, and I think I don't remember who the educational director was, and Paul Erickson and one of the board members, and I don't remember his name now, but they would put on a kind of an instructive. I guess nowadays you'd call reality. And they'd raise all these parliamentary procedure questions, and I was always interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of my first remembering going to state camp, and that must have been. Oh, that must have been in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime in the 30s, maybe late 30s.
Okay. Okay. And as we come up into the late 40s and early 50s, you got more involved in Farmers Union. What did you like about Farmers Union?
Well, I just I guess my folks probably was instrumental in that because of the liberal progressive programs they had, and pretty much everybody agreed on it, and it just kind of evolved. I guess
Mm-hmm.
I guess I had every position in the Farmers Union, starting at the local secretary and chairman, and then county chairman, and district chairman, and then I went downhill from there and I was a fieldman.
Okay. You were elected to the state board in what year?
I can't tell you.
I think it's 1957, but you tell me, is that right?
Could be, yes. But that's very close,
okay.
I think.
Okay. And what sort of activities were going on about that time? In the early 50s, they had those trips to Washington. Were you involved in those?
Not at first, no.
Okay.
I didn't go on.
Was that later on when you were on the board?
I'd been on board quite a while before I went to Washington.
Oh, okay.
Several years.
Okay. Okay.
I remember the state convention was this big, and some of the members was real orators, make speeches.
Mm-hmm. Emil Oryx, for example?
Yeah, I can't think of another one, but he had this dramatic way of talking, and you could hear him across the biggest auditorium you ever saw without a mic. And he'd get up there, and it's kind of interesting. I don't know I don't remember anything he said, but of course, Emil Oryx, he could talk, and he really had the ability to remember things and explain them and talk about them just off the cuff.
Mm-hmm.
He could talk for 30 minutes and say something.
Okay, let me move along here. What during the early time when you were an officer out here in the 1950s and on the board, what were the key issues and what sort of things were you worried about?
I remember, I think it was the first year Virginia and I was married. Roland Vereen was the director from this district, and they had a meeting on universal health in Jamestown. Well, he ended up couldn't go, so Virginia and I went, and a couple of other people went with us, or 3 other people. I had my dad's car. He had a pretty new Chevy car, and we drove that, and we picked up people in Huron and Miller, and went up there for this universal health program. They were very radical at that time. In fact, somebody said the FBI is watching, but I don't know. They never interviewed me.
Were you involved at all? There was something in the early 50s called the Cattleman's Caravan. Were you involved at all in that?
No.
They took a bunch of cattlemen to Washington, D.C.
I wasn't in that, no.
Okay. Well, who are some of the people from around here that you remember? You mentioned Roland Vereen. Who are some of the other people that were around here then in those days that you remember?
Well, Keffler's, remember, McNinney's.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just about everybody out there. If you want to, neighbors. All the neighbors was members.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And had an educational director, and they have big, they'd have the meetings in somebody's house, kind of trade around, and if there's something special, they'd have my grandpa's house because he had a big rooms in his house. It had a lot of people, but most of them was. And then the county meetings was held in a schoolhouse someplace, and that was different areas of the county.
Okay. Let's talk about some people from the larger region. I'll just give you some names, and you can talk about them a little bit if you want to. Homer Ayers.
I didn't meet Homer Ayers until probably the 60s.
Oh, okay.
But I knew he was active. And I don't know whether you want to know about this, but at that time...
Whatever you want to say.
Huh?
Whatever you want to say.
Before that, there were 5 districts. Well, and District 5 took in what is now District 6. Well, there was 2 factions there, and they had a hard time. There was always a battle for officers. So then somebody said, well, and I think, what was it, 2 and 7 was divided at the same time. And I'm not sure who instigated. Somebody on the board, I think, had bylaws changed. So we had District 6 and District 5, and there was still some animosity about philosophy and this and that. But that all settled out, and we got along pretty good. And Homer Ayers was active in that at that time. But I don't remember meeting him until he retired and moved to Sturgis. I probably did, but I don't remember. And of course, there's a lot of backbiting going on and name calling, and that was when if you want to get somebody, you call him a communist. See, and Homer Ayers was called a communist. I don't think he's ever a communist, but they called him that. And then Homer was here. Of course, Homer was very intelligent and very liberal, and he could express himself very well. Mm-hmm. He didn't always agree, but he was one of the people that was really for the people. You know, they called him a socialist and communist and all that stuff, which wasn't really true. You know. Yeah, he was, and he could write. He could write poetry.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I got a copy of most of his poems here.
Another guy who was involved up north of here was John Reedy. Do you remember John?
John Reedy was director when there was this controversy going on. And there again, you know, when you got to know John, you knew he was very much like Homer. He was for the people, and he was a good operator, and he managed co-ops, and later he served as a legislator, very good legislator. So he was one of the kind of people that was very oriented to the common or the broad spectrum of people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. George Levine.
Well, George Levine was I don't remember being active in the county organization, but then later, well, I think at one time there was that must have been in the 60s, there was a kind of a offshoot from the South Dakota Democrat Party, and I think that's when George got involved in politics. And of course he was an ally of Homer, and he was smart and articulate and well-versed.
Mm-hmm.
And uncompromising.
And up in District 6, Frank Butler.
Well, Frank was also involved in that. Different. They split, it turned into District 5 and District 6. And of course, Frank had the same philosophy as Homer and the rest of them up there, and Virginia and I was too. See, and
mm-hmm.
other people here, and George Levine was pretty much with them, and real liberal. In fact, they was about 10, 20 years ahead of most people as far as.
Well, who were there some people in the Farmers Union around here that weren't inclined that way? Or was it mostly people outside the organization?
Well, I don't remember that they were. When we had that big local out there, I can't remember so much that. They were liberal, but they weren't quite so articulate as.
Okay. Carol and Jack McKenna.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think how we first met them. I think it was probably at a state convention. They was at a state convention, and then Carol and Virginia went to Washington on some bus trip, and I don't remember what they went there for. And then we got there. They lived out in Perkins County. At about hour and a half to get out there, and we'd visit them, and they'd come in here, and we just become friends, see,
mm-hmm.
and often talk to each other and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. During those years that you were on the state board, what sort of relationship existed within the board? You want to talk about some of the other board members, some of the people you were working with?
No, when I was on the board, it was there wasn't any there was debate, but it was congenial. People were congenial. Actually, when I was on the board, they all worked together pretty good and in harmony. Didn't always agree, but I don't, but it was very, very interesting and good. I liked all of them. And I can't remember all the people I was on the board with, I guess. Ewald Osterberg, Lloyd Larson, Frank Butler, Harry Caslin. And I can't remember some of them. I don't remember for sure who was from District 7. Anyway, it was a very good board to be on.
And when you went on the board, Paul Opsel was still president?
Yes. He was president for a number of years, and then Harold Golseth, and he passed away. He hadn't been president too long, and then of course Ben took over. Then.
You want to talk about those guys at all? What sort of leaders they were, and how you saw them anyhow? How they were different and the same?
Well, they were much like the rest of the board at that time, And Paul Upsall was a good speaker, and he worked hard at it. He'd make a lot of county meetings and stuff all over the state, and he worked hard at it. And I can't say his name. I just mentioned it.
Harold Golseth.
Harold Golseth was, I guess, probably the first state president was a Republican, but he was very liberal and good to get along with and stuff. In fact, he's the one that got me on the Washington bus trips, 59-60.
Okay. Now, did you just go in on the bus trips, or did you? Sometimes they stayed in there. Did you do that at all?
Oh yeah, 6 weeks.
Okay.
Those 2 years.
Yeah, I think Lloyd Larson referred to it as bird dogs in Washington.
Yeah, kind of that. That's kind of what you were. Well, after a time or two, you kind of knew the schedule, and you could kind of brief the people and tell them what's coming and urge them to take part. We got together in the evening and talked about things, and at least a day or two before we went up to the hill, and we stayed in a hotel that was within walking distance of the Capitol. So and you'd go up in a group, and people were very cooperative. It was easy to do.
How many people would come in? How many would come in? Would it be a busload each time? And
it'd be a busload 3 times each year.
Okay. And they were coming in from other states too?
Yeah. See, our South Dakota bus would come in, and then they'd be off a week, and they'd come in. They'd come in every other week. So those off weeks, so you'd have from some other states. Remember Wisconsin group was probably the most articulate group I ever was with. In fact, the senator was, I can't remember his name, but he was kind of a conservative, and he started talking and just killing time, actually. Finally, one of the ladies got up and said, "Senator, we come here to talk to you." and they shut him off, and they just kind of took turns going around. And he just said there kind of open-mouthed. And one of his staff people told me after, he said, "I never saw a group quite that well organized." And I felt pretty good about that, although I didn't deserve all the credit for it. They done it themselves.
How were those lobbying things organized? Did they break up into teams, or did the whole state group go together?
No. The only time the whole group was our own representatives.
Okay.
And then we'd meet them with the group. But otherwise, there'd be about 4, maybe 5. And of course, the national staff would give you a list of who to call and what building they were in, and some of the issues it was talked about. And most of them was pretty, at least polite, although some of them weren't quite. They'd meet you at the door and say, we're busy. But most of us would listen to you. And it worked very well, and the people liked to do it. After they'd done it a time or two, they really liked it. They'd be kind of shy at first. Some of them would, you know.
Was that like for many of them the first time they had been?
Oh yes.
Away from the farm.
Well, I don't know
Or
about
any
that, but
length,
it's the first time
yeah.
they went to Washington.
First time to Washington, yeah. Okay. And then in 1967, is that right? You switched jobs and you mentioned you sold insurance for a while. When did you start doing that?
Well, that must have been in the 50s.
Okay. So you were kind of doing
later than that, because when we had the Eisenhower saw bank, put the place in the saw bank, and we moved to town.
Oh, okay.
So that's it. And then I done odd jobs around town. Just 1 year worked for the ASCS and that kind of thing. And then there were 3 or 4 part-time insurance agents in the county. So eventually, I kind of took over, and I had an office downtown here, but I can't tell you the exact date. I suppose I sold 15 years as dad, and I went to work on the staff.
Yeah, and that was like 1967. At least that's what the figure I've seen. Is that right? When you started on the staff?
Well, I think it was later than that.
Okay. What were you doing then? What did field representatives do then? I may have an idea.
Well, actually, it was a liaison job between the state office and the membership, and attended all the meetings you could, and help them set up membership. Right, that is pretty important. Some of it was legislative. You had to get people to testify, go to peer if they're interested. And it's an interesting job, kind of a hard job. Not hard, but spend a lot of time at it. Most of the meetings in the evening, and then you might have to drive 100 miles to go to the next one the next night, and that kind of stuff. And not always, but
yeah.
But it took a lot of driving. A lot of driving.
You had the whole West River area?
Yes.
Okay.
Met a lot of nice people.
Who were some of them?
Well, there was Al Melky down here in Custer County. Can't think of the names, but there. Penny County had active. Butte County had some active people. Anderson. Can't think of his first name right now. He was active. And then well, there's people, I can't think of their name now. Orson, Dorothy Othier, very active. Can't think of the people, especially those areas down there now. Gregory County, Tripp County had a lot of members and active people and good leadership. And they was always glad to see you and wanted you to come out, and they cooperate pretty good. There were just a lot of them, and Chuck, I can't remember their names.
And you had amongst your job, you had to go to co-op annual meetings.
Oh yes.
And were there more of them out there then than there are now, or?
I suppose there was a few more, but most of them I think are still active.
Yeah.
And that was top priority to go to the co-op annuals, and they were nice to go to. They always give me a few minutes to talk.
Yeah. What year did you start lobbying in Pierre?
I think it was 1972.
Okay.
And I lobbied for 8 years. That was a Hawaii opener.
Yeah. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Huh?
You want to talk about it a little bit?
Well, I guess so. Ben said, I want you to be a lobbyist. And I didn't know I did hardly knew the Senate from the House, but then, and at that time, the chairman of the committees could have executive meetings, and you didn't know when he was going to schedule them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of difficult. You'd go down to the Capitol in the morning, and here they say we're going to have a committee meeting, and so you kind of didn't know what to prepare for ahead of time. And then they finally stopped that. All the meetings had to be open, period, and they had to post them the day ahead of time. So you had a chance to, if you had a special one that you wanted to work on, why you could prepare a little bit, at least take material along. But some of those that first year, they kind of liked to screw me up. Well, I shouldn't say that, but they sure didn't give you any breaks. And then after first year or two, I kind of learned the ropes, and then we set up. We'd have meetings with the other ag organizations, which I think was a step forward. I don't know whether they still do it or not, but you had the Cattlemen's Association, the hog producers, and soybean people, Farm Bureau, Farmers Union, and South Dakota Stock Growers, and they sat down and well, the legislators liked it because we sat down. If we could all agree on some certain bill, we could we'd assign one of us to present the Ag Unity position on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't have to sit there and listen to half a dozen guys that talk about the same thing, and it worked out pretty good. If we didn't agree, that was it. We just didn't. We went our own ways, but it was all at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was no. I remember, and still do. When I was filming, I did hear people cussing the other organization. They didn't like them, or they was too conservative, or they didn't like so and so. But while we had that Ag Unity, I think it was a good thing, and
mm-hmm.
it was interesting, and I'm sure we got a lot more done than if we hadn't had it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Did you have an intern that worked with you?
Huh?
Did you have an intern that worked with you some?
Oh yes, Ben would arrange. I can't remember the professor at State University. He's a political. I can't remember his name, mm-hmm. but he'd get Ben or get a hold of him or something, and they'd send a student up and work with you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they done a lot of leg work, and some of them were very good.
Did Ben spend time out too?
Huh?
Did Ben spend time in Pierre with you too?
Oh yeah, Ben would be out quite often. Seemed like, yeah, I suppose. I don't think he ever come out every week, but if something that was really wanted on our program, he'd probably be out there.
What were some of the key issues you were dealing with in those years?
Well, of course, there's income tax, and the Family Farm Act. Finally got that passed after about 4 years trying.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How did that work as far as the fight to get it passed? What happened to it when it didn't pass?
Well, you just start over the next year, you know. Mm-hmm. And there was a very strong, and there was bipartisan support on it. And finally got it passed, and some people, it was just death as far as they're concerned. I remember one, I think it was in the House, when that passed, he was so angry his face just turned white. But he passed it. Then, of course, the governor's office worked. He was Governor Knipe. Can't think of the guy's name now. But he did a lot of work on it, and some of the other lobbyists were against it, of course. Mm-hmm. But they're getting paid to do it, and it was quite interesting. And of course, it was a big thing when it finally passed. I remember that night in the Senate, it passed. And income tax, and of course, we should have had income tax in. There's a bill that the Governor Knipe had in. There was a what they call the Cheney bill. He was a legislator from Pennington County, had a bill in. And then there was another one, and I don't remember the main sponsors, but the problem there is the sponsors was kind of set on their own, and actually ended up killing each other. Otherwise, if they could have just got together, we'd had income tax in the early 70s. But I don't know, went down, and there hasn't been a big effort since, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm. There was, didn't it come down in, what was it, in the Senate to the lieutenant governor casting a deciding vote one year?
On income tax?
Yeah.
I don't remember that. I don't know. It could have been.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably Harvey Wallman, the lieutenant governor. Or do you know?
I'm thinking that was, the guy from Sioux Falls.
Oh, yeah, he had that bus company.
No.
No, he was a Senate.
Yeah.
He wasn't in the Senate. He was
Bill Doherty.
Huh?
Bill Doherty.
Oh, yeah. Oh, maybe he did. I don't know. Yeah, he was Bill Doherty. Yeah, he was
Who are some of the legislators who were friendly to Farmers Union back in those days? You mentioned Cheney had that.
Well, Cheney was
tax
pretty
bill,
good,
but-
and of course he was one of the Republicans.
Yeah.
And I'd have to look back. I just don't remember.
Yeah,
We had good support,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and we had a good bill. And of course, to get it passed, there's some amendments that made it not as effective as it should have been.
Mm-hmm. 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 And then, of course, there were some people who didn't work so well with this.
Oh, yeah. Well, putting here all the lawyers was against it. Well, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of them were. They didn't. I don't know why they didn't like it, but they didn't.
What was the climate like then in Pierce? Sometimes, recently, it seems like it's that there's a greater degree of partisanship today than there used to be. Did people get along with each other, other than the fact that maybe didn't agree on issues?
I think so. It isn't. They weren't quite so hardcore as they are now. It's just the politics now is you either are or you're not. They don't. A lot of the legislation, or I should put it this way, not very much of the legislation was partisan.
Mm-hmm. 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 How did you go about? How did you go about involving the members in the lobbying process back then? How did members from the countryside
during the
get
session?
involved? Yeah.
Well, for one thing, I wrote a weekly newsletter
Mm-hmm.
and keep them informed of what's coming, and maybe urge them to come if they're interested. I could, and sometimes I'd phone them or write a special letter, and maybe the county chairman or somebody, and they'd do the legwork on it. And we didn't very often have big crowds of members coming in,
Mm-hmm.
but I think a lot of them wrote or made phone calls.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we had most of the membership was behind us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to turn on the cooler.
Okay.
Getting hot in here. That should start pretty soon.
Okay. Who are some of the lobbyists? Somebody like, say, Jack McCullough.
Jack McCullough was, of course, the South Dakota Stock Growers executive secretary and lobbyist, and very articulate. and I always got along with him, but you had to understand Jack. He was kind of like and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, but he had things that he'd start talking and had to just go in a certain order, and you had to wait him out, and then. But I like Jack. Let's see, Henry Nakamus was Farm Bureau chairman for part of the time, and then can't remember the chairman after that. Pretty good. And I don't remember who was there from the pork producers. And then the Cattlemen's Association, or I guess it was cattle feeders.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember his name either. He was probably the hardest one to get along with.
Mm-hmm.
He was so set in his ways, and he's pretty partisan.
Uh-huh.
Can't remember who was executive secretary of the South Dakota Association of Cooperatives.
Well, J.D. Lind was.
Who?
J.D. Lind.
J.D. Yeah. He was kind of the head of more or less head of the chairman of the Ag Unity Group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was interesting. I just wish I could remember names better.
That's okay. During those years, did you get to attend very many National Farmers Union conventions? Or
Many of them, yeah.
Yeah,
they'd send the bus in and always got on the bus and went to that.
Mm-hmm.
Traveled all over the country to see it. Almost all over the country, just conventions.
Uh-huh.
That was interesting.
Mm-hmm. What and Virginia used to play piano and organ for state conventions. Did she do national conventions too?
She done a few national, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, she done some national.
Okay.
I don't remember how many, but probably 4 or 5 national conventions, and I don't know how many state conventions. Years and years.
Yeah, I think she was doing it when I started, and right up until we started moving around from here on, where we didn't maybe have an organ all the time later on. Yeah.
Well, she played at the last one they had in Rapid City.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But she had her health wasn't good enough to play anymore.
Yeah. What year did you leave staff? Was that like 1983 or something like that? Earlier mid-80s.
Well, it could have been, yeah, it could have been probably that 84 maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it was 84.
Yeah. And you received the Meritorious Service Award.
Yes.
And that was that?
Oh, look.
Okay.
It's hanging on the wall, Chuck.
Okay.
Well, there's no date on this.
Oh.
No. That must have been.
Seemed like it was at Mitchell, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was at Mitchell.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't have a date on it, does it? Huh. I'll be darned.
Anyhow.
Okay.
Well, let's see. That was after Lee went to as national president.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was retired from the board or for the staff.
Yeah.
I think after that.
Was that when Dallas was president?
Yes.
Tonsager? Yeah.
Yeah, Dallas is.
As you think about there's challenges facing organizations like Farmers Union and cooperatives have changed over the years. What seems like the biggest change to you as far as organization and co-ops?
Well, when they started those papers people, the members that started it, was very sincere, very hardworking, and worked at it. It seemed like after a generation or two, they weren't quite so. They didn't seem quite so important because it's kind of a thing, is an everyday thing, and they didn't really. I shouldn't say that, but some of them didn't. Many of them did take the interest in it that their parents did, or grandparents didn't.
What kind of advice would you give someone today?
About what?
About in general, about being involved in in the farmers union, or
I've always believed that that it need to be organized. You have to be organized, and it's just very important that agriculture organized. You know, there'll be a group startup. We want to do this and do that. And their intentions, you can't disagree with their intentions, but they should have spent that time and effort in the farmers union.
So kind of like the splintering and fragmentation of new organizations starting then, huh?
The what?
Kind of like the problem of too many organizations getting started.
Well, your leadership would be fragmented and everything, and it just put the shoulder. Even if they went to, even if they joined another organization, it'd been better than not join any.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future? Do you think things are going to be all right or not?
Oh, it isn't all right.
Yeah.
There's too many economic problems, and the philosophy in the federal government is wrong-headed, and I think it'll change, but maybe sooner than later, for all I know. But it's pretty tough. It seemed like the big, rich business people are running the government, and they don't do it for the people. They just don't do it. People have to, and so many of them go along with it. But I think that'll change.
When you were young, did you believe that individuals could make a difference in their communities and in agriculture?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I always thought young people should be involved. I really did. And I used to think that they could do more than the older guys, but now I changed my mind on that. Well, the reason I say that, I'm not bragging, because I just said I'd rather be young than 84 years old. but yeah, after you've been through the mill, you have some experience and knowledge that the only way you can get it is doing it and be there. And but you need young people too, because you get old and tired like I am and can't do it anymore.
But you still think young people can make a difference? So yet today.
Oh yes, yes, sir.
Even though the money does have a powerful position.
I think so. I think that's the only. I've always said if the eligible voters in this country get out and vote like 70 to 80%, there would be problems. That the problems would kind of solve themselves, or the people would. And it might not always be what you think is right, but it'd be better than it is now.
You got anything else you would like to talk about at all? Just kind of open it. I always like to give people a chance if there's something that they want to say.
Well, I thought about this some since you called me, but maybe not enough.
Okay, but that's okay.
Well, I guess I wouldn't do anything different. I always believed in the farmers union, still do. I believe in cooperatives. I believe in people involved in the political process, and I just hope that everybody, just take it upon themselves and not depend on a 30-second political ad just before election, because that's not what the issues are really. And I that's what I believe. I just like to see more people involved in everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot of people aren't. I don't have any long-winded dissertation on it, but I guess to put it on a thumbnail, it'd be get involved in your business and work at it, and stay informed. That's important. Stay informed. It's so easy to watch news on TV, and that's mostly just headlines, and you need more than that to get totally involved in it and understand and read a lot. People don't read anymore much, I guess. Well, maybe they do on the internet. I guess more and more people are on the internet. But I read a daily newspaper and a news magazine, but they get thinner and thinner too. I don't really have anything else unless you have some more questions, Chuck.
No. We've been visiting with LeRoy Hardy. Thank you for taking part in the Cooperative Legacy Project, LeRoy, and good luck to you.